The woman who comes after me will be a bootleg version of who I am.
You know, I thought I had to become like a pop star, or like an actress to get here.
She will try and write poems for you to erase the ones I've left memorized on your lips.
No.
But somehow poetry is getting me into all
Poetry is the new pop, man.
Hi, my name is Rupi Kaur, but her lines could never punch you in the stomach the way mine did.
Like, okay, I'm on the right track here because I know J.K. Rowling got rejected only like 500 times.
And Milk and Honey is my first collection of poetry.
You gotta always think of JK, man.
Always.
She will then try to make love to your body. But she will never lick, caress, or suck like me. She will be a sad replacement of the woman you let slip. Nothing she does will excite you, and this will break her. When she is tired of falling apart for a man that doesn't give back what he takes, she will recognize me in your eyelids, staring at her with pity, and it'll hit her. How can she love a man who is busy loving someone he can never get his hands on again?
This is probably the most disliked poetry book across the internet, and yet it has sold over 2.5 million copies, been translated to 25 different languages, and has started the new trend of Insta poetry.
Fuck out of the way! I can't see! There are cars there, motherfucker! Get out of the way!
There are those who believe this book to be heaven sent, and others who believe it single-handedly killed poetry. So who's right? Another 2 million people who bought this book on drugs? Why is her work so unbelievably popular? This is where I come in as someone who has studied poetry for 3 years and been writing for 10 years with the intent of complete objectivity.
I'm here at the behest of a client.
Who?
I will not judge this book, and neither will I give it a free pass, and in the process you will find
A
me
respectful, quiet, passive observer of the truth.
On July 24th, 2017, Rupi Kaur was accused of plagiarism by Naira Wahid, first in private and then publicly on social media, where she expressed discontent over her work being allegedly copied by Kaur in her book Milk and Honey. Nevertheless, if Wahid had inspected closely, she would have observed that before the question of plagiarism, there was the question of whether Rupi Kaur's poetry was even poetry in the first place. Nothing is safer than the sound of you reading out loud to me. He says, "I'm sorry, I'm not an easy person to want." I look at him surprised. Who said I wanted easy? I don't crave easy. I crave goddamn difficult. I'm ready for you. I've always been ready for you, the first time. On days like this, I need you to run your fingers through my hair and speak softly.
Oh wow. I am disgusted. You better talk to her before I do, because I'm hurt her feelings.
I mean, these are practically offhanded remarks that an individual might make in passing, not poetry. Reading these poems, you can see Kaur desperately trying to emulate poetry in the style of the likes of Hemingway and Charles Bukowski. These poets stress the urgency of writing in a manner that is devoid of decorations and flamboyance. It is clear that Rupi Kaur does not care for embroidery, but instead longs for simplicity. But here's the catch. Writing that does not rely on a wide array of difficult words and complex metaphors is the most difficult to write. It is equivalent to an individual reaching for the top of a ladder when they haven't stepped their foot on the first rung in the first place. Kaur was not ready to write poetry that difficult. The best poets are the ones that speak the most with the fewest words, but that can only be accomplished after years of hard work. 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. They have long taken your blood. You're a dry stick in a basket. Is this how it works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. Charles Bukowski here did not use a single word that requires running to the dictionary and searching up the meaning of a word. And yet these words raise the heart. I especially love the phrase, "In this room the hours of love still make shadows." However, it feels as though if Rupi Kaur had been writing this poem, she would have written this one phrase and not added anything more, the way that Charles Bukowski had done. This one phrase is more explicated, magnified, intensified by the narrative woven around it. This is something that Rupi Kaur doesn't understand. Take this poem. "You were so afraid of my voice that I decided to be afraid of it too." This would have worked because it's good alone in and of itself, but it would have worked if Kaur had woven a narrative around it. Furthermore, breaking any rules is revered solely when you have followed those rules to an excelled degree by the writer before. Then it is better to follow the rules if you cannot break them gracefully. And what are the rules? Use poetic devices, that is imagery, metaphor, and so much more in your poetry. Ocean Vuong understands this better than anyone else. See the difference between the way Rupi Kaur and Ocean Vuong talk about their relationship with their father. "Father, you always call to say nothing in particular. You ask what I'm doing or where I am, and when the silence stretches like a lifetime between us, I scramble to find questions to keep the conversations going. What I long to say most is, I understand this world broke you. It has been so hard on your feet. I don't blame you for not knowing how to remain soft with me. Sometimes I stay up thinking of all the places you're hurting, which you will never care to mention. I come from the same aching blood, from the same bones so desperate for attention, I collapsed in on myself. I am your daughter. I know the small talk is the only way you know how to tell me you love me, because it's the only way I know how to tell you." On my knees, I watched through the keyhole, not the man showering, but the rain falling through him, guitar strings snapping over his globed shoulders. He was singing, which is why I remember it. His voice, it filled me to the core like a skeleton. Both mourned the mental or physical absence of their father respectively, and yet Ocean Vuong excels in his expression. He expresses the sole memory that he has of his father watching him through a keyhole while he was showering, and describes it with delicate care, which tells the reader that he misses his father, whereas Rupi Kaur simply says that she longs for her father. So what is so wrong with Rupi Kaur's poetry? Why does it feel so off? The answer is simply this: laziness. There is little to no effort in the poems written in Milk and Honey. The problem is not a lack of poetic devices or the mission to write what is true and real. The problem is not with methodology but with the intention. Rupi Kaur did not go into Milk and Honey in order to revolutionize poetry or evolve. She wrote simply whatever the hell came to her mind, and accidentally, for better or for worse, changed poetry. And the world, who have not had a taste of better poets, simply ate it up because her poems are so accessible, they're so easy to understand. So to Naira Waheed, if you're going to accuse someone for plagiarism, you could have chosen a better poet. And to Rupi Kaur, if you're going to plagiarize, you could have chosen a better poet to plagiarize. If Kaur had examined the series of events that culminated in the success of her book, she would have traced it back to a fateful day on Monday, March 23, 2015, when she posted a vignette photo showcasing period blood, intended to tackle religious shame regarding menstruation, on Instagram and Tumblr. Little did Rupi Kaur know she was holding the horns of an archaic monster that was much larger than her. In Muslim and Hindu communities, period blood is whispered in secret, with women unable to go to places of worship like mosques and temples, as well as in certain communities being considered impure, dirty, and harbingers of bad luck. Resultantly, they are forced to live outside their house in a shack wearing special clothes away from their family members.
Who tends the orchard? Who fixes up the gables? Emotional torture from the head of your high table. Who fetches the water from the Rocky Mountain spring? And I walk back down again to feel your words and their sharp sting. And I'm getting fucking tired.
The photo shoot went viral on Instagram, amassing over 70,000 likes and 11,000 comments. Unsurprisingly, Instagram took down her photos in 24 hours. In response, Kaur took to Facebook and wrote, "Thank you, Instagram, for providing me with the exact response my work was created to critique. I will not apologize for not feeding the ego and pride of a misogynist society that will have my body in underwear but not be okay with a small leak. When your pages are filled with countless photos, accounts where women, so many who are underage, are objectified, pornified, and treated less than human. Thank you."
Eyes are bursting. If our love died, would that be the worst thing? For somebody I thought was a savior, you sure make me do a whole lot of labor. The callous skin on my hands is cracking. If our love ends, would that be a bad thing? And the silence haunts our bed chamber. You make me do too much labor.
This response went viral and amassed millions of views. Rupi Kaur would go to public readings and find herself hounded by women asking for her poetry book. She would go home and write about being an immigrant woman of color, a unique experience that has rarely been articulated throughout literature. This not only lended authenticity to her work, but additionally gave a voice to a raging minority group, feeling unheard and silenced, who would surely buy her book. However, yet again, the issue still remains that the aforementioned poems in Milk and Honey about the immigrant experience and of being a woman are not well written. And there are other poets, such as Warsan Shire, out there who have written much better about the exact same experience. My body is burning with the shame of not belonging. My body is longing. I am the sin of memory and the absence of memory. I watch the news and my mouth becomes a sink full of blood. The lines, the forms, the people at the desk, the calling cards, the immigration officer, the looks on the street, the cold settling deep into my bones, the English classes at night, the distance I am from home. But Alhamdulillah, all of this is better than the scent of a woman completely on fire, or a truckload of men who look like my father, pulling out my teeth and nails, or 14 men between my legs, or a gun, or a promise, or a lie, or his name, or his manhood in my mouth.
If I had a daughter, I'd watch and could not save her. The emotional torture from the head of your high table. She'd do what you taught her. She'd meet the same cruel fate. So now I've gotta run so I can undo this mistake. At least I gotta try.
Some women aren't allowed in their religious place of worship out of their homes to do certain things and are told they're sick, as if the period is a common cold. They want to tell me I should be quiet about this, that all of this we experience collectively does not need to be seen, just felt secretly behind closed doors. That's why this is important. Their patriarchy is leaking. Their misogyny is leaking. We will not be censored.
For somebody I thought was my savior, you sure make me do a whole lot of labor.
By the start of this video, I promised complete objectivity, and it would be remiss of me not to mention a few poems in this book that were actually pretty good. The first boy that kissed me held my shoulders down like the handlebars of the first bicycle he ever rode. I was 5. He had the smell of starvation on his lips, which he picked up from his father feasting on his mother at 4 a.m. He was the first boy to teach me my body was forgiving to those that wanted, that I should feel anything less than whole, and my God, did I feel as empty as his mother at 4:25 a.m.
Every day, therapist, mother maid, nymph, then a virgin, nurse, then a servant, just an appendage, live to attend him so that he never lifts a finger. 24/7 baby machine, so he can live out his picket fence dreams. It's not an act of love if you make her, you make me do too much labor.
I'm reminded of a book, perhaps the most harrowing book I've read in 22 years. A Thousand Splendid Suns, that tells the story of a harami, Maryam, who's married off to a man triple her age when she's 17. By the start of the story, she longs to live with her father, Jalil, but instead is forced to live with her mother. In her mother's memory, Maryam was born in a hut without medical care, while Jalil was in Takht Safar, horseback riding with his friends. Upon the news of his daughter, he had only shrugged and stayed in Takht Safar for another 2 weeks. When the pain got bad, I'd bite on a pillow and scream into it until I was hoarse. And still no one came to wipe my face or give me a drink of water. And you, Maryam Jo, you were in no rush. Almost 2 days you made me lay on that cold, hard floor. I didn't eat or sleep. All I did was push and pray that you would come out.
We ended up at a get-together with friends. At the end, you asked if I need a ride home, and I said yes, because our dads work for the same company and you'd been to my place for dinner many times. But I should have known.
In Jalil's memory, he'd arranged for Nana to be taken to a hospital in Herat. She had lain on a clean, proper bed and been tended to by a doctor. When he had received the news of his daughter, he had not shrugged but instead rode back to Herat. They told me it was all over within an hour, Jalil said. You were a good daughter, Maryam Jo. Even in birth, you were a good daughter.
When you began to confuse kind conversation with flirtation, when you told me to let my hair down, when instead of driving me home toward the bright intersection of lights and light,
Maryam was more inclined to believe Jalil over Nana, and one day decided to run away from her mother to live with her father. She returned home after a day to see a body hanging from a tree.
took a left to the road that led nowhere.
The body belonged to that of her mother.
I asked where we were going. You asked, was I afraid?
After her mother's death, within the course of a week, Maryam's fate was decided. At the age of 16, she was married off to a 45-year-old man.
And that's when my voice jumped over the edge of my throat, landed at the bottom of my belly and hid for months.
I'm reminded of an excerpt from The God of Small Things that is reminiscent of what happens to Maryam in the day leading up to her marriage. When she looked at herself in her wedding photographs, Amu felt the woman that looked back at her was someone else. A foolish jeweled bride, her silk sunset-colored sari shot with gold, rings on every finger, white dots of sandalwood paste over her arched eyebrows. Looking at herself like this, Ammu's soft mouth would twist into a small bitter smile at the memory, not of the wedding itself, so much as the fact that she had permitted herself to be so painstakingly decorated before being led to the gallows. It seemed so absurd, so futile, like polishing firewood.
All the different parts in me turned the lights off, shut the blinds, locked the doors.
Her teeth rattled when she thought of the night, the time when Rashid might at last decide to do to her what husbands did to their wives. She lay in bed, racked with nerves, as he ate alone downstairs.
I hid at the back of some upstairs closet of my mind while someone came and broke the windows.
The therapist places a doll in front of you. It is the size of girls your uncles like touching.
Someone kicked the front door in.
Point to where his hands were. You point to the spot between his legs, the one he fingered out of you like a confession.
You took everything. Someone took me.
How are you feeling? You pull the lump in your throat out with your teeth and say, fine, numb really. Midweek sessions.
It was you who dove into me with a fork and a knife, eyes glinting with starvation like you hadn't eaten in weeks. I was 110 pounds of fresh meat you'd skin and gut with your fingers like you were scraping the inside of a cantaloupe clean. I screamed for my mother as you nailed my wrist to the ground, turned my breast to bruised fruit.
There is no shame in this, Maryam, he said, slurring a little. It's what married people do. It's what the Prophet himself and his wives did. There is no shame.
I can't even let a lover in without being sick. Every lover who touches me ends up feeling like you. Their fingers you, mouths you, until they're not even the ones on top of me anymore, it's you.
Maryam was a living embodiment of her father's mistake and sin, having intercourse outside of marriage. After all, she was a harami, a word used against those in Islamic culture that were born outside of marital intercourse and are hence of illegitimate birth. Maryam did surmise, by the way Nana said the word, that it was an ugly, loathsome thing to be a harami, like an insect, like the scurrying cockroaches. Nana was always cursing and sweeping out of the kolba. However, Maryam was not just illegitimate by virtue of her birth. She was illegitimate by virtue of her womanhood, which rendered her culpable to the infinite and merciless atrocities of the world. After all, to be a woman is to commit an original sin.
Under blue moon I saw you. So soon you'll take me up in your arms. Too late to beg you. Oh, can't say though I know it must be killing time. Unwillingly mine.
A woman is a half-formed thing. She cannot exist as a one-dimensional creature, and if she does, the world neither forgives her nor tolerates her.
Up against your will, through the thick and thin, you'll wait until you give yourself to him.
You get raped with eyes, raped of identity, of soul, of dignity, of your own bare fucking existence. You belittle to a titillating thought or a reprimanding tisk-tisk. When they tell me to cover up, I'm reminded that in their eyes my body will always remain a forefront of objectification. That in the default existence of it, it can only pose as an instrument, an object of satisfaction, a thing to be sexualized and thus to be saved from that sexualization.
Nights I saw you, so cruelly you kissed me. Your lips a magic world, your sky all hung with jewels.
I'm introduced as a body first before a girl, a fellow human, a person, a soul. When they tell me to not cover up, to expose myself, I'm reduced once more. My body can only be seen or hidden. It cannot exist as a simple thing. A body that eats or yawns or sleeps has hands and legs to pick things up.
Up against your will, through the thick and thin, you will wait until you give yourself to him.
When they tell you to hide your body, your waist, your hips, your thighs, down to the last cuticle on your fingertips. It sends a subliminal message to your brain. You shouldn't exist. Your default existence is an affront, an insult, an abuse, and so hide. Hide every hiccup, cough, laugh, because it is a sign of your existence, your humanity, and that can only be reduced by the vultures of this planet. The idea of burqa angers me. The world can only tolerate a woman completely hidden, down to the last cuticle on her fingertips. It proposes the idea that a woman can only be safe if she interacts with the world that she was born in through small holes sewn into her burqa. The woman can only give tiny pieces of herself to the world, and the world can only be given in small pieces to the woman. Basically, a woman only has to not exist for her to not be sexualized. There has to be an inch difference between non-existence and existence for a woman to be treated like a normal human being, or for her to not get raped. That's messed up. And all of that for what? Because men can't keep it in their pants? So, in 1,000 Splendid Suns, Maryam is a harami, yes, but not by virtue of her birth, but by virtue of the fact that she had the ill will, the misfortune, the audacity of being born a woman. And in her marriage to Rashid, it became very clear to Maryam that Jalil had only shrugged upon receiving the news of her birth and stayed 2 weeks in Takhta Safar, and upon seeing her for the first time, had commented on her longish face.